Hello, my name is Tom Hockaday and I'm the Managing Director of ISIS Innovation Limited. ISIS Innovation is a company wholly owned by the University of Oxford, and we exist to help transfer technologies and expertise from the University of Oxford and elsewhere out into industry. I am delighted to have this opportunity to present ISIS to you, and in this presentation I will describe in outline our various activities. ISIS is a company made up of 3 different groups, all of which are part of the single company, ISIS Innovation Limited. One of the most important points to emphasize at the start is that we are 100% wholly owned by the University of Oxford. So we're always looking at ways to support and serve and help the University of Oxford. So the 3 groups in ISIS, the first group is the Technology Transfer Group, and this is the largest group by number of people and financial activity. And in fact, this is what we were set up to do for Oxford University originally back in 1987. And in the Technology Transfer Group, we're involved in identifying intellectual property coming out of the research activities at the university, protecting it, marketing it, and licensing those technologies out to industry, both existing companies and also new spin-out companies that we set up. We manage a seed fund to help us do that. We manage a network of investors to help us do it. And also we work very closely with the Oxford University Hospitals NHS Trust, so where we're responsible for commercializing IP that comes out of hospital research activity as well. The second group within ISIS is Oxford University Consulting. And Oxford University Consulting is all about helping to sell and make available the expertise of the academics at the university to clients all over the world, maybe in industry, maybe in government. So for technology transfer and Oxford University Consulting, it's all about helping the University of Oxford to make connections with industry and to transfer technologies and expertise from the university laboratories out to the wider business and political communities for social benefit for people all around the world. The third group in ISIS is slightly different, very much part of ISIS Innovation, but different in that it is our own consulting business where we're working with clients all over the world other than Oxford University to help them transfer their technologies and to develop their innovation management systems. I'll now talk a little bit about Oxford University generally and then move on to ISIS. So the University of Oxford is one of the greatest universities in the world. It has a worldwide reputation and regularly tops the league tables in all sorts of different categories. The university is very old, very long established, set up in the year 1188 in Oxford, and has performed a fantastic role throughout history in terms of developing young people and developing research and new ideas. Today, the university is the largest research university in the United Kingdom. Last year there was a research expenditure of over £500 million, £501 million. And that makes Oxford the largest research university in the UK by quite some distance. Now that research creates huge amounts of research outputs, which you can call intellectual property, and some of that intellectual property is capable of commercialization, and some of that is done by people who are interested in commercializing the results of their research, and that's where ISIS comes in. One of the most important aspects of all of our activities is the statement on the slide here, where our whole approach is that ISIS helps researchers who want help to commercialize the results of their research. That's a very important point because it underpins all of our activities in recognizing that we exist to help researchers, and we want to help those researchers who are actually interested in getting involved in technology transfer. And this is so important because it's the researchers at the university, the academic staff, the research staff, it's the scientists themselves who have the ideas. And so what we are all about is helping those scientists to be interested in technology transfer and commercialization, to support them in doing it, to encourage them to want to engage in it, and help the successful transfer of technologies and expertise from the university out into industry. And the reason we want to do that is so that these new technologies and ideas get invested in by industry, whether that's existing companies investing off their balance sheet or new companies raising investment finance to develop new technologies, so that ideas from Oxford get developed into new products and services which are beneficial to customers, consumers, and patients. Research activities at the university are organised into 4 divisions: the Medical Sciences Division, the Maths, Physical and Life Sciences Division, Social Sciences, and the Humanities. Now, for fairly obvious reasons, most of our work is in the Medical Sciences and Maths, Physical and Life Sciences divisions, although increasingly we're working with the Social Sciences Division, particularly in the area of Oxford University Consulting. And the services and support that we offer is available to everybody across the whole university. And we're always looking for opportunities in the humanities and in fact in any research activity across the university. And we've had some success with projects in the humanities division as well. It's a great strength of Oxford that, as well as the sort of vertical organisational structure of departments and activities, there's a tremendous interdisciplinary culture here where researchers are talking to each other all of the time, working on different subjects, collaborating, which of course is a very fruitful area for new ideas, new technologies and innovations. The university has a number of different parts which are involved in innovation and entrepreneurship, and we work very closely with all of those. So for example, in the Said Business School, which is part of the Social Sciences Division, we're very active in working closely with the Centre for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. In the Maths, Physical and Life Sciences Division, there's a science park and research park area called the Begbrook Science Park, and we work closely there because there's premises there for new companies. And within the university centrally, the Research Services Office is probably the most important contact we have in terms of making connections with the relationships with organisations that fund research and the ability to commercialise the intellectual property that's coming out of that. The financial model for ISIS is of course a very important aspect of looking at ISIS as an organisation. And we look at that in terms of the investment of resources that the university provides to ISIS and what the university gets back in return. We look at the returns the university gets back in 2 ways: the financial return, but also the non-financial return, and both are very, very important. So the financial model is based upon the university providing ISIS with an amount of money each year that we use to spend on patenting inventions that come out of Oxford University. So last year that was £2.5 million, which is a significant amount of money, which we spend on patenting hundreds of inventions that come out of the university's research activity. So with that flow of money from the university to ISIS, one of the questions is, what does the university get back in return? There are a number of direct financial benefits in terms of cash that we return back to the university, and assets that the university owns as a result of our activities. And these are shown on the slide. Overall, the financial return that ISIS provides to the university adds up to a very positive and substantial return on investment for the amount of money they provide us for patenting. both in cash terms for the royalties that we send back to the university, and assets, for example, in the shares in spin-out companies that we set up, where the university is the shareholder in those companies. But that's only the financial benefit. A very, very important part of what we do is transfer technologies to improve people's lives so that new ideas, as I mentioned earlier, attract investment, become new products, become new services, so that consumers, customers and patients all benefit. This slide shows all of the staff within ISIS Innovation. So there's 76 people in the organisation in all, organised as is shown here, into the Central Administration Group, the large Technology Transfer Group in the middle, Oxford University Consulting, and also ISIS Enterprise. Now all of these people are based here in Oxford, apart from 2 people we have in Spain, 3 people in Hong Kong and southern China, and 1 person in Japan. And those international offices are recent developments where we've started to develop a platform or a series of platforms for doing technology transfer around the world. Just to concentrate on the technology transfer activity for a moment, you'll see in the middle there's a large number of technology transfer managers organised into various teams by discipline and by scientific and business experience. Now you'll also notice that most of those people have a PhD in science, which is very, very important because they understand the research culture of the university. So when a university academic comes to us to disclose their new idea and start talking about how to do technology transfer, the academic is talking to somebody within ISIS who understands the science and understands the research culture in a university. But those people also will have, when they left their university, when they finished their PhD studies, they will have worked in industry and gained experience of how industry operates and how industry thinks. So the way we describe this is that they speak the language of research and the university, and they also speak the language of industry and business, so that we can translate between the two. And that's very much what we do at ISIS. We help transfer and translate between industry and university research. Also, these people have experience of finance. And so in the next slide, what we can see is a diagram we use to show the connections that we make at ISIS between the academic world, the commercial world, and the financial world. So in ISIS, we're like the red arrows in the middle of this picture, making connections between academics, industry people, and financiers. We realized recently that it's more than just a 3-dimensional problem or activity as shown in the previous slide. There's really 4 dimensions to this because that little model operates in different ways around the world. So if we're doing a deal in Korea, for example, the business culture and the way that people do business will be different than if we're doing a deal in the Middle East or in China or in Latin America. So increasingly we're developing activities outside of Oxford with our base in Spain, in Hong Kong, and in Kyoto in Japan, so that we can make international technology transfer more attainable. All of our activities are underpinned by a very strong set of policies and procedures, both within the University of Oxford and our own operating procedures in ISIS Innovation. The university has a policy relating to how it manages intellectual property, and there are 3 parts to this policy. The first part is who owns the intellectual property. The second, what sort of help and support is provided to academics in the university. And the third, who gets the money when we're successful in generating income from technology transfer. So here in Oxford, the university claims ownership of the intellectual property generated by staff and students arising from their research activities. And then secondly, the university provides a lot of resource in the form of ISIS Innovation to help those researchers commercialize their technology, and then there are rules on how the money is divided as well. You can see here in this slide our overall activity indicators, where last year, the year ending March 2010, our total annual turnover was £10.1 million. We've got over 1,500 open projects, 80 employees, and we returned £5.3 million to the university and its researchers. We filed 100 new patent applications to add to the 1,500 or so patent applications and granted patents that we own. We set up 8 new companies, we did over 100 licensing deals and 243 consulting agreements. The consultancy aspect of our work is very important. Oxford University Consulting is a great way of making connections between university academics and clients, whether they're in industry or government, providing a way for academics to provide their expertise externally, and providing also a way for external clients to identify people in the university with expertise. We also get involved in helping departments to make their equipment and services available to industry, to generate income and to explore new ideas. Now, consulting is a great way of establishing links with companies where the initial contact might be a relatively small consulting engagement, which leads on to more substantial research funding relationships. I mentioned at the start that one of the 3 groups we have in ISIS is ISIS Enterprise, and it's a little bit different from the Technology Transfer Group and Oxford University Consulting, because here what we're trying to do is to work with organisations, whether that's universities, research institutes, governments or companies outside of Oxford, all over the world, to help them develop their technology transfer activities. And ISIS Enterprise has grown very successfully over the last few years, so we now have about 20 people working in Oxford, Spain, Japan, Hong Kong, China, many other countries to develop a consulting business in technology transfer and innovation management. And the way that we look at this is making connections between technology providers, technology seekers, and the facilitators, very often government agencies who want to see more technology transferred to develop knowledge-based economies. At ISIS, we're involved in a very wide range of marketing activities, and this involves informal and formal networks. The informal networks are an incredibly wide range of business interactions we've built up over the years. More formally, we run a society called the Oxford Innovation Society, which is an incredibly powerful network, including hundreds of people over the years who've been interested in innovation in Oxford, all part of the Oxford innovation ecosystem. The way the Oxford Innovation Society works, ever since we set it up in 1990, is that organisations join as members and pay an annual subscription fee, for which they get a number of benefits, including early access to technologies that we are promoting, and also we organise 3 very substantial meetings and dinners each year to bring together a community of people involved in innovation. So these are people from the university, researchers, lots of ISIS people, but also members of industrial companies who are interested in sourcing new technologies, members of government who want to promote the knowledge-based economy and technology transfer activities, and also the professional services firms, the bankers, accountants, lawyers, and patent attorneys who are very keen to develop technology transfer business. I mentioned earlier the Begbrook Science Park. This is owned by the university. Oxford is incredibly fortunate in having a large number of science parks in and around Oxford. This one, owned by the university, has an incredibly successful sort of dual activity of research conducted by the university, but also some innovation and enterprise space for new companies that can be based in the science park, so that they're part of a community developing research activities and growing their businesses. Other bits of the university involved in innovation and entrepreneurship? Well, there's the Enterprise Centre, the Entrepreneurship Centre at the SAI Business School, which is an incredibly important part of raising awareness of the research and possibilities for getting involved in entrepreneurship amongst students. There's also a student society called Oxford Entrepreneurs, which thousands of students have joined over the years, and they get involved in many, many activities to promote entrepreneurship and their own business ideas around Oxford. So in conclusion, having given you an overview and an introduction to all of our activities, we look at ICES in terms of how it relates to universities, how it relates to business, to investors, and to government. And there are some really key points that it's worth highlighting by way of conclusion. In a university, there are important factors, important points that people need to grasp and buy into, if you like. The first of these is that technology transfer is a good thing. It's important that people in the university accept that transferring technology and expertise through industry, it being developed so that new products get developed, is an important role for a university to play. You then need to recognise it doesn't happen on its own, so you need resources, you need some rules, so it's governed in an effective way, and also to recognise that it takes a long time for the culture of a university or research institute to develop in such a way that people are comfortable engaging with industry, and also it takes a long time for new ideas to become new products. So the message we like to give out is that if there's something you want to do, you know it takes a long time, well, the thing is to start and then not stop until you're confident of success, which is probably in 10, 15 years' time. For business, what we provide is access to technologies, access to investment opportunities. We help business understand universities, and we help businesses innovate. So we help provide new ideas that can become successful new products. For investors, we provide opportunities to invest in new early stage businesses, so the venture capital community has a good deal flow. We help entrepreneurs and business people find jobs in early stage technology businesses. And then for government, what we are all about is part of their interest and their mission in creating a vibrant, innovative economic growth in a particular region or a particular country, so that there's growth in the economy but also growth in society through better products and services. So this brings to an end my short introduction to ICES as part of this overall package of presentations. And the final slide here is simply a picture of our website to make the point that there is a very substantial amount of information about how we do things, the systems and processes and structures that we have in ICES, and also the technologies that we're currently looking to promote, the companies that we're trying to get going, the companies we have set up are very well described in more detail on the website. So thank you very much indeed for giving us the opportunity to talk to you about ICES. I very much hope that you enjoy the rest of these presentations and hope that from this you increase your understanding of university technology transfer and technology transfer around the world. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Chris Moody, and I'm going to be speaking about the process of commercializing new technology, primarily through the paths of licensing and spinning out and formation of new companies. It's interesting to think about how the world's economy and global business has changed in the last few decades. In the past, most companies, large companies in particular, would develop all of their new products and do all of their R&D internally within the companies. And now this has changed considerably in the world, and the most successful companies, particularly technology companies, are looking to the outside world for new ideas and scouring the research institutions and universities to find the most creative ideas wherever they are. This process is known as open innovation and has become the standard for what most companies are trying to do in the world today. The situation with companies and universities is quite different, but yet they are converging in a very interesting way. From a company perspective, the need to look to the outside world for ideas in order to be competitive is essential for their continued success. And so this idea of open innovation is spreading. On the university side, in order to maintain funding from governments, most governments are saying to the universities, we want to see more impact from your research. If you want us to keep funding you, then show some benefit to society, either through creating new companies and jobs or direct social benefits. So these two ideas are pushing universities and companies closer together. So what is the typical process for commercializing new technology? In this chart, you'll see that there are several steps in the process, and the first of these, of course, is to identify what is the new technology. And in this process, you're looking at, is this a unique idea? Is it something that someone hasn't done before? And then, is it protectable? Could it be patented, or can you keep it as a trade secret? The next step in the process is to take that idea, once you've decided that it is unique and it's protectable, and try and get it ready for market. So this is called translation. And it usually involves building a better prototype or having a demonstration of the new technology that's developed enough that you can either attract a company to license the technology, or you can attract investors into a spin-out company. So once this prototype is done and you're successfully showing a new technology to investors or potential licensees, the next aspect of this is really to look at the market itself and try and get a feel for how large is the market, where is the market, who's going to buy this technology, how is it going to be used, and who benefits from it, where is the value. And this is all part of the marketing process in developing either a licensing strategy based on that marketing or the business plan for a spin-out company. Once you're getting a better feel for the market, then you're faced with this fundamental decision on, should we spin out this technology or should we try and license it? And this is a very complicated decision and involves a number of factors that we'll go through. But you're going to go down one of these paths if you continue with the commercialization process. Then once the license has been done or the company's been spun out, there are a number of things that need to be done that we call the post-deal management. And this involves making sure, if it's a license, that you're being paid for the royalties that are due on that license, or by being paid for milestones that are reached. If it's a spin-out company, you're going to be an owner in this company if you own the IP or if you're one of the entrepreneurs. And so you want to be able to manage that equity ownership in the company. There are a number of tools that are available, some of them quite simple and very helpful in looking at this evaluation of the new technology to, one, decide if it's worth developing at all and taking to the market, and secondly, is it better to spin it out or create a license opportunity? So if you look at this chart here, it's a way to take a very subjective set of ideas and convert them into a numerical system where you can get an objective idea of where you stand. And these can be created with whatever characteristics you want in the matrix, and you can weight them in different ways to allow for what you think is more important. This is just a simple one that we use sometimes to evaluate technologies. If you look at the first part of it, we're first determining what's the size of the market. Is it a big market or a small market? And then, is it growing or is it shrinking or staying the same? And depending on those answers, it moves toward, yes, we should commercialize it, or no, we should just stop where we are and go on to the next project. The next thing you look at is what's the reaction in the market to this idea? So we will pick up the phone and call potential licensees or investors or customers and say, we have this idea and it does this. If this looks interesting to you, would you buy it? And if so, how much would you be willing to pay for it? And what would be the benefit to you or your company to have this? And you get an idea of people are either enthusiastic about it, they want to know more, or they say, we don't need it, and there's really nothing of interest there. So it's good to get that real-world connection early in the process and get a feel for the technology and how valuable it is. The next question is, how close to the market is this technology? Is it something that's going to require 5 or 6 more years of development before you have a product or a service that's ready to sell? Some products, this is a natural part of the cycle. If it's a medical technology or a pharmaceutical process, these often take 7 to 10 years to reach the market. So you're looking at that timing. If the closer it is to market, the more attractive it is, and the less difficult and expensive it's going to be to develop. The next question is, okay, we have this unique idea. We think there's a market there. So can we protect it? Is it something that can be patented? Or is it a trade secret that we can keep without having to disclose? Sometimes it's just know-how, and can we keep that a secret and get the value out of it? Sometimes what you're developing, the real value is in a brand. So you're going to have a valuable trademark that'll be part of this. So you're looking at the IP and trying to decide how strong it is and how protectable. The next question is, how difficult is this going to be to commercialize? Is it going to require a lot of support? Are you going to need the academic inventors, if it came out of university research, involved full-time in this for years in order to take it to market? Or is it something that they can do on the side? So depending on how much support you need, that will weigh on whether or not you continue with the commercialization process. Is there work that needs to be done to continue to develop the technology, or has it been finished? You know, again, if it's developed, it's finished, and it's ready to go, then it's much more attractive, isn't it? The next question is, you know, are the inventors able to stick with the program and support it and put the time into it that's needed? For instance, if you're dealing with academics, they have lots of other responsibilities and constraints on their time. Often they have periods where they can't spend any time on anything other than teaching or grading exams, that sort of thing. So have a very good feel for whether or not the academics are going to be available and are committed to working on the project. The next question again is, now we've gone through this process, is this more likely to be a spin-out or a license? And if you lean toward licensing, that's usually more favorable to going forward because licenses are less expensive, they're faster, they take less time for your time and the academics' time, and just in general, it's easier to do a license than to create a spin-out company. So if you're going to do a spin-out, that's, again, a larger commitment. So let's first take a look at the process of developing a license of technology. Basically, a license is giving a legal right, an intellectual property right, to someone to use the technology. And this is often referred to as IPR, or intellectual property rights. The license itself is usually granted to an existing company. So you're taking something that's coming out of a university or from a researcher and then transferring the right to use that technology to an existing company that will incorporate it into their products or create a new product. This transfer will usually involve a considerable process to get there. You're going to want to try and market this technology to as many potential licensees as you can in order to get the best deal possible for the owners of the IP. Now, this marketing process usually starts with creating a kind of a non-confidential single-page summary of the technology that's a kind of a teaser to attract interest into that technology. And this will be put on your website or listed on various databases that are available to list new technologies. These non-confidential summaries are designed so that they give away enough information to attract attention, but yet don't disclose anything confidential, and they never say anything negative about the technology, because at this point all you're trying to do is to get people to contact you and ask for more information. So you're going to talk about all the positive things in this in general terms, not disclosing anything that might be patentable or secret, and try and attract attention. The next phase in this, once you have an inquiry from a company that they're interested, is to give them more information but information that, again, is not confidential. If they want to see confidential information and they're really interested, then you need to put in place a confidential disclosure agreement, or a CDA. And these agreements are often called CDAs or NDAs, a non-disclosure agreement, but they're basically the same thing. And the idea is that it's a contract with the other party that they'll receive the information, but they won't disclose it to anyone else, and they won't use it for any purpose other than the evaluation of the technology. Some other terms that are useful to talk about here is the key terms of a licensor and a licensee. The licensor is the owner of the IP, the university or the entrepreneur that's going to license the technology. The licensee is the company that's going to buy the license or pay for the license from the licensor. So just try and keep those terms straight. Some of the pluses and minuses of licensing versus spinning out a technology. First of all, on the pro side, they usually work well. A license is a very well-established tool for commercializing technology, and all companies usually understand them. The other positive part about them is that you get paid, and you get paid quickly. So it's a faster way to market. When a license deal is signed, there's usually an initial payment that goes to the licensor to at least cover their upfront costs of commercializing the technology to that point. And often there'll be payments for royalties as the product is sold in the marketplace. Sometimes there'll be milestone payments that are paid to the licensor when certain events happen. For instance, maybe they put the product onto the market. At that point, there's a milestone payment. Or they reach their first million in sales, and there would be another milestone payment. So these can be built in, and there are many different ways to structure license agreements. So they're easier to get to market, they're faster to get to market than a spin-out, and they're lower cost and lower risk. Spin-out companies are quite risky and quite difficult, as we'll talk about more in a few minutes. On the downside, you usually need patent protection to do a license. If you don't have a patent, it's very hard to get a company interested in that technology because they want to be able to own the exclusive rights to commercialize it. If they can't keep a monopoly over that technology and anyone else can use it and sell it, then there's not a lot of commercial value to the company. So you need patents. Sometimes there's a long wait for the revenue to come in, and this can be dependent on the type of technology. For instance, again, with pharmaceutical products or medical products, there's a very long regulatory approval process that they need to go through. And this process can take 5, 6, 7, 10 years before the approval is reached. If you're doing a license, you're not going to have any revenue coming in that time period. You're also relying on the licensee, the company that's buying the right, to do the commercialization. You know, you're hoping that they will market it and be successful with it, and you're giving up control. So you don't have as much control over it when you do a license. You also usually need to have a product that's very well developed in order to get a license. So you need a good prototype or a proof of concept that will demonstrate to the licensee that it really is ready for the market as much as possible. Some things the expectation is, you know, that it's early technology, and they're okay with that. They're willing to wait and willing to pay, but that's the exception. There's also a risk that some company will try and license the technology in order to not develop it. They'll put it on the shelf and take it off the market in order to keep it away from their competitors because they have a competitive product that they want to continue to use in the marketplace that maybe they're deriving very high profits from. So this idea of somebody buying up a technology and shelving it does happen, and it is a real concern when you're commercializing technology using licenses. The process of licensing, the first step you're going to go through is to create a strategy of how are you going to approach the companies that might be interested, which companies you're going to go after, what is going to hook them in and get them interested, what are the terms that you're willing to negotiate as far as the amount of royalty payments you want back. Do you want them to continue to pay for developing the technology farther by contracting with the researchers in your institution to continue to work on it? So there are many concerns here that will go into this licensing strategy. There is unfortunately no single process or format that can be used for licensing strategies or licensing negotiation or even license documents. It's very dependent on each technology. They're all unique, and the process and issues are different. So in this illustration you're seeing, it's more like the random stone wall than the even brickwork. And you need to be prepared that you're going to have to try and fit the process and the negotiation to the technology rather than trying to force the technology into a rigid process. So once you're formulating this strategy for the license, first of all, you're going to want to determine what's the scope of the license. Is there a particular region that you're going to license to? Maybe you'll have one company that licenses the technology for Asia, one for the Americas, one for Europe. Maybe it's a global license. Maybe the license is only for one market segment. For instance, you've developed a technology that's useful in the automotive industry, and you license it to a company in that industry. You may want to have another license for the aerospace industry because the same technology might have application there. So you want to define what's the scope of the license, what regional areas and what market sectors that will allow the companies to use the technology in. In the development of the licensing strategy, you want to include a discussion and understanding of the value of this technology from the viewpoint of the company that would be licensing it. If you are selling them something that would increase their ability to get their pricing up or to sell more product or to utilize their facilities better, then try and quantify this in terms of money for them and make it fit within their business, and that will increase their perception of the value of the technology. You also want to be trying to look at this in terms of what could go wrong in the future and building into your strategy the things and the clauses you want to put into the agreement that would protect you in the future. For instance, let's say if they wanted to put the technology on the shelf and not develop it but keep it away from their competitors, that's not in your best interest. You'd like to see it put into use, and so you're going to want to put in milestones into the process that say, we expect you to market it and sell so many units of this within a certain period of time, and if you don't, you have to pay anyway. So you're going to get the money even if they don't hit the milestones. So they have a strong incentive to do the marketing and really sell it. In addition, you're going to want to put in a provision called a Clawback Provision. And what this does is it says if you don't develop the technology and you don't meet the milestones, we can take the license back and you lose your money, and then we can relicense it to someone else. So in all of our licenses, we try to put in this clawback provision. The whole licensing process, you know, there are two sides to this. There's the entrepreneur, inventor side, and when they're looking at this new technology, they see how brilliant it is. They see that the market is huge and the potential of it. You see that there are many people that will want the product, or companies, and how wonderful it's going to be. If you're on the company side looking at this and thinking about licensing the technology, what do you see? Risk, right? From their point of view, anything new is just risk. And the question in their mind, again, is how much risk? And so they're looking at, will the technology really work? Maybe it won't. Maybe the competition is stronger than you think it is, or there's some other new technology that may pop up and destroy the value of this technology. And the market itself may be smaller than what you think it is. So these are all things in the mind of the licensee that are risky. And so their perceived value is going to be here, and on the entrepreneur side, your perceived value is up here. And it's very hard to get a meeting of the minds there because you have very different perspectives on it. But it's good to understand that going in. We talked a little bit about confidential disclosure agreements. Let's talk a little more about this. CDAs are an important part of this whole process because as you talk to each potential licensee, if they're interested, you're going to want to show them confidential information, and you're going to need the CDA signed. Now, there are a lot of issues that are involved in these, and first of all, have you filed patents, or is there technology that could be patented and you're planning to file patents? If you disclose that technology, as you probably understand well, you won't be able to patent. Once it's in the public domain and you've shown it to anyone else outside of your research group, then it's considered disclosed and it's not patentable. Beyond that, even though it may be protected by a patent application, often you don't want to show this to other companies that are in the field because it gives them an idea of what they should do from a competitive point of view. And if they have a head start on competing with your technology, even if they don't license it, you've helped them and you've hurt the value of your technology. So trying to keep these things as tightly controlled as possible is really important. And only disclose as much information as you need at each stage of the negotiation. Don't give away everything at first just because you've signed a CDA. So there are a number of different kinds of license agreements, and they take all different forms, and there are different provisions that go into those licenses depending on the type of technology and the industries you're in. But some of the fundamental types, first of all, is the evaluation or option agreement. And this is a very common thing with early stage technology coming out of universities and research centers. The technology usually is fairly unknown. You don't know if it's going to be a viable product or not. It needs more development, maybe a proof of concept needs to be done, more research. So a company, if they're interested, will often say, well, we like this. We're not sure if it's really going to be valuable or not. So what we'd like to do is to buy an option to license this technology. And an option is just an agreement saying, we will agree to license it to you in the future if you're interested, and this is the price you're going to pay us now in order to lock in the right to license it later. The other type of early agreement is an evaluation agreement. And the evaluation agreements are designed so that this company that's looking at the technology can use the technology and take it back to their company and their laboratory typically and evaluate it and have full access to the technology for evaluation purposes. Sometimes this will involve sending samples or having their research people come into your laboratories. But there are different ways to arrange them. But the idea is to give them an opportunity to evaluate the technology, and then if they like what they see, they will license the technology with a regular license. So there again are different types of licenses that are permanent licenses or more longer term. First of all is the patent license, which is the most common. And a patent license is basically saying, we have this technology, it's patented, and we're going to give you the rights to use this patented technology. There are also what are called assignments. And an assignment of technology is where you transfer complete ownership of that patent or the technology to someone else. And once you do that, it's permanent, you've given it up, you'd have no rights to it, and it's gone. So generally in the tech transfer process, we never want to do assignments of technology or patents. We want to license them. And that way we can keep more control over them. And again, in cases where you want to claw the technology back, you can do it. Another situation that comes up that is a good reason to do licenses instead of assignments is sometimes the company that licensed the technology goes out of business. And if they go bankrupt, what happens to that license? Well, if they've assigned the technology and they own it, you don't have any chance of getting it back. But you can put into a license agreement provisions saying that if the company goes out of business or is acquired by another company, the technology comes back to you, or you have the right to approve that new change in the company that's taking place. So you just have a lot more control with doing a license. You don't need to have a granted patent in order to do a patent license. Most technology coming out of universities, the patents are applied for but not granted at the time they do the license. Some countries, depending on where you are, it can take 7 or 8 years for a patent to actually issue from the time you apply for it. So you don't want to be waiting during that time period to do a license. So when a company is looking at the technology and trying to decide on whether or not to license it, part of the evaluation they're doing is saying, what's the likelihood that this patent application will be successful and be granted? And the more you can convince them that the technology is strong, it's unique and patentable, the more they're going to pay for it and the higher the value will be. Software is another area beyond patents, and sometimes software can be patented depending on the country that you're trying to protect it in. In the United States, for instance, it's very easy to patent software. In Europe, it's very difficult. You have to have very special requirements, such as the software is being used to control some physical process or machinery in order to be patented. The most common way to protect software is to copyright it, and then to keep the source code for the software secret. The copyright is very simple. You just mark it copyright and make sure you put it on any copies of it and inform people of the copyright. A copyright can be transferred and licensed just like a patent, and it goes through a similar process. Whenever you do a license for software, one of the practices that we've found very useful is that you want to make sure that everybody understands which version of the software was licensed. So in addition to describing it in the license, you take the actual disk, burn a disk, and attach it to the contract and tape it to the back of it. So if there's ever a dispute, you know exactly what version of the software was licensed. You can also license know-how. And know-how is all the things that go around a patent or software to make it work. And sometimes you have just know-how and a secret, a trade secret. But this know-how can be described and licensed. It's difficult to describe sometimes, so you need to be very careful in the wording of it. And describing the value and convincing a company of the value of the know-how can be quite difficult also. So you want to make sure you put together a good story for the potential licensees on the value of this know-how and why it's important to license it. So let's summarize the licensing of technology and some of the terminology that's commonly used in the licensing process. First of all, you want to think about the field and territory of use. What can be done and where? Who can use it in what industry segments and in what geographic locations? The next issue is who else will be able to use this technology? Will you allow it to be sub-licensed to someone else? Is it an exclusive license that is granted only to one company for worldwide use, or do you break it up into multiple licenses? Again, multiple licenses usually bring in more money for the licensor if you can do it. There's also something called a license back, and this is very important if you're continuing to do research in an area. When you license this technology to a company and you want to continue to do research in that area, you've given away the rights to it at that point. So unless you put in what's called a license back provision, where you're granted a free license to continue to develop the technology, you're not allowed to continue to work in that area. And this has actually been a problem that's happened in the real world, where a researcher will work in an area for 20 years, they'll license the technology, and now they can't work in their field anymore because all of their work has now been contained in this license that's owned by someone else. So this license back provision is a very important aspect to think about. The other thing is, how widely is this license going to be known? Most companies want to keep licensing very secret because they see this as a competitive advantage in the marketplace, that they have a technology that they can develop and sell and no one knows about it. It's secret from their competitors. So on the university side, you often want to talk about this technology. You want to say there's a license. You want the good publicity that comes from it. And often the researchers want to publish their work. And the company on the other side is going to say, no, we don't want you to publish because that will disclose this technology to our competitors. So you need to work through these issues in the negotiation process. And then who does what with the patent? If the company's licensing this technology, you want them to also take over the responsibility for maintaining the patent and protecting it. So if there are additional fees to be filed or follow-on patents that need to be filed as a part of the same license, you want them to pick up the cost and burden of doing this. You also want them to protect the patent. If somebody infringes, you want it to be the responsibility of the licensee to go after whoever's trying to use your technology without permission and bear the legal cost of enforcing it. This can be very expensive, and it's normal to have the licensee pick up these costs. What other parties are needed to make the technology work or to use the license? Sometimes you've done this work and created this IP in conjunction with another institution or other people. You need to have their permission to license the technology because they're part owners in it. So making sure you own it and know who owns it and get the right people to sign the license agreement is very important. How are you going to keep track of the progress on the licensee's side? If they're supposed to be selling the technology and bringing in money and paying royalties and milestone payments, how do you know if they've done these things or not? Well, you build in audit provisions into the license agreement and also reporting. So you want them to regularly give you a report of how they're progressing and how much money it's making and what the royalty payments are that are due. Just to make sure that they stay honest in this process, it's very common to put in a provision to require an audit or to allow for an audit. And sometimes an audit can be expensive. You bring in an independent auditor, you have to pay them. So you decide if you think there may be a problem, then you call in an auditor. Otherwise, you just let it progress and keep going. Sometimes you put in a provision saying that if there is an audit and something is found where there was money that should have been paid and wasn't paid by the licensee pays for the cost of the audit. And if something isn't found and everything is as it should be, then the licensor pays for the audit. So the burden is there on either side. Another issue that comes in with licensing is the jurisdiction and what laws are to be applied if there's a problem. So let's say you have a dispute and you need to go to court. Well, if you're licensing it from the UK, it's going to be better for you if you're in UK courts applying UK law. If you're licensing it in Korea, then you want to go into a Korean court or apply Korean law to it. And so both sides, if the company, let's say, is based in the United States and the technology is coming from another country, you're going to get into a dispute about which courts you go into. So this is part of the license negotiation. And sometimes you'll end up with a compromise where you say, we'll apply the laws of this country, but the courts of this country. And it's a very strange situation, but it really happens where you'll have a case in a US court applying the laws of Korea or China or wherever, or vice versa in a Chinese court applying US law, depending on what you've put in the license agreement. But there are ways to work out compromises. You can also put in a provision for arbitration where it doesn't go to court at all. If there's a dispute, you hire an independent arbitrator to decide what the outcome should be. And the International Chamber of Commerce provides these services in various places in the world, and that's a common way to cover this area of dispute jurisdiction. The other thing you want to put in here is what happens with improvements. Let's say you're continuing to develop this technology and there are going to be follow-on patents and further inventions. Who owns those? You want it very clear from the license agreement whether or not this company that's buying the license is also buying the improvements. Usually from the licensor side, you want to keep the improvements to yourself and do another license later. The company is going to want all the improvements, so this will be a point of negotiation. The work that the licensor is going to do and the licensee, as far as is the licensor going to keep developing the technology, and is the licensee going to have to market and develop a product based on the technology? You want to describe the work that's expected on both sides, and again put in milestones and things that are clear that they've been achieved or haven't been achieved. Warranties and liability is another big issue in licensing. If your technology is being licensed out, you want to protect yourself from liability. You want to tell the other side that basically this is what you're buying. What you see is what you get. We make no guarantees. There are no warranties attached to it. We think it works, but it's up to you to make it work. On the company side, if they're licensing it, they're going to say, we want you to guarantee that the technology does what it's supposed to do. And this is a dispute that happens in every license agreement. From our perspective, we never give warranties with licenses. So you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself in that situation. The other thing that happens in the real world is that the market situation changes, the technologies change, and sometimes what looked like a great license when the company signed it, a year later, because of some other new development or some change in the market, it's worthless. So they want to have the ability to terminate a license if there's a reason to do it. And on the university side, if they don't do what they're supposed to be doing on the license, you want to be able to terminate it. So putting in clear termination provisions should be in every license. And of course, the last thing and most important thing in the license is the financial terms. You want to very clearly describe royalties, milestone payments, and upfront payments for the license. Just a note on royalty payments, it's usually a percentage of the sales from this product or service that you're licensing. And it can be described as a percentage of revenue or a percentage of profit. And there are a lot of variations on both of those. Revenue or turnover is what you want to tie to if you're the licensee, because profit is something that companies have some control over, and they can manipulate where the profit is occurring in their business and whether or not this license shows much profit at all. So it's much better for you to tie the royalties to a percentage of the sales, the net sales, rather than the company's profit. So that's a brief summary of licensing and an overview of how it works and things you should be concerned about. Next, we're going to go on to talk about spin-outs and creating new companies. Creating a successful spin-out company is a very exciting endeavor, but it's also one of the most challenging that you can take on. But at the same time, I highly recommend that everyone try being a part of a spin-out company at least once in their life. The normal path for a spin-out company is that it's been developed in a university research project, and the university owns the intellectual property that's the basis for the spin-out company. So this IP would be licensed from the university to the new company, and in exchange for that, they're going to expect to own part of the new company or take equity in it. This equity ownership can be just by itself, or they can also have a revenue stream tied to the new company as well, where they would expect royalties from the license once the company is doing business and selling their product. The key to a really successful spin-out company is to start with a good business plan, and this business plan is based on a good market understanding and market study. You want to make sure that you've clearly identified the market that you're going after and how you're going to capture that market. Let's talk for a few minutes about the pros and cons of spin-out companies versus licensing as a way to take a new technology to the market. First of all, spin-outs are exciting. They're a lot of fun. You know, everybody loves the idea of creating a new business and being an owner and founder of a new company. They can potentially make a lot of money. You know, some spin-out companies are very successful. Statistically, most of them aren't. So you have to be prepared that it could go either way, but don't let that stop you from trying. One of the big advantages of a spin-out company versus a license is that you retain a lot more control over what's happening with that technology or idea. In a spin-out company, you control it, you have the market plan, you have the people, and you're responsible for taking it forward. In a license, you're giving up that control to the licensee. So those are the advantages. Now, what about the disadvantages of a startup? First of all, you usually need good intellectual property that's protected. In other words, it's patented. If you don't have patents, it's very difficult to get investors to put money into that spin-out company. You also are often faced with a lot of competitors in almost every field you might go into with a spin-out company. So make sure that you have a strategy that's going to work and you're not up against a company like Microsoft and you're trying to sell software for PCs or tablets against them. If you have direct competitors that are dominant in the market, the spin-out's probably not going to be successful. You also need investment. So most spin-out companies, in order to operate and get going, they need investment from venture capitalists or angel investors. And so you need to identify that source of funding before you start. The most important thing in a spin-out company is the people. And if you talk to venture capitalists and ask them, you know, what do you look for in a spin-out company, they'll usually say the people, the people, and the people. Because you can have a great idea, great technology, and the wrong people running the spin-out, and it will fail. If you have mediocre technology but great business people running that spin-out company, it can succeed and be very successful. I think Microsoft is a good example of this, where their software wasn't that special, but they had some brilliant business people as founders in the company. Spin-outs also take a lot of time. If you're going to create a spin-out company, you need to be prepared that it's going to dominate your life for a long period of time. It always takes longer, is more difficult, and takes more time than you expect. You're also going to need a lot of external advice from accountants, lawyers, tax advisors, other technologists that you need to consult with. So be prepared that you're going to have to bring a lot of other people in to provide help in that company in one way or the other. Spinouts are also a high risk. 90% of spin-out companies fail within the first few years. So the odds are not in your favor. Sometimes the technology doesn't work, sometimes there are new competitors in the marketplace, and there are all kinds of things that can happen that will cause a company to fail. So be prepared that it's a high-risk endeavor before you start. The key elements that will make a company successful or cause it to fail really boil down to just 4 things. First of all, do you have a good original idea? So is the kernel of the company there? Do you have this unique business idea or technology? Secondly, do you have the right people to run the company? Third, is there a market for this idea or technology? And fourth, do you have adequate funding to implement your strategy and business plan? If you can answer yes to those 4 questions, then your odds of success are much higher. Another thing to think about when you're forming a company, particularly a university spin-out, is what's the role of the technologists in this new company? Are they going to run it? Are they going to drive the strategy? Or are you going to bring in people with business and entrepreneurial experience to do this, working in conjunction with the academics? There are basically 2 types of companies if you're an investor looking at this. One is what's called a technology-led company. And in this type of company, the technologists are laying out the strategy. It's usually technology-based and engineering-focused. The engineering plan for the company drives the product strategy. And the feeling is that if we build something really clever, people will buy it. This type of approach and this type of company is really not very interesting to most investors because they know that the chances of success are low. What they're looking for is a business-led company. And by this we mean that there's a marketing strategy and the people running the company are driving to a customer market-based strategy. And if it's based on a real market that's been identified, real customers that are out there, then chances are the investors will put money in. So you really want a business focus rather than a technology focus to the company. And again, the people, you're better off to have experienced entrepreneurs and business people running the company as the CEO and keep the technologists in a technology role. Just a few points on what makes a business plan effective and attractive to investors, and it's also used as a tool to bring in potential executives into the company. First of all, you want to keep it brief. If it's not short and concise, the investors are not going to read it. So you want to have the executive summary in the front, 1 or 2 pages, hopefully only a single page. And then the whole body of the entire business plan should be no more than 15 to 20 pages. If you have a lot of other material that supports what you're saying in the business plan, put it in the back as an appendix, but not in the body of the business plan. That way an investor will read through the entire plan, and if they have particular questions, they can find the answers in the appendix. Make sure that all the numbers in your business plan are accurate. If you have any errors in it, it undermines your credibility, and it undermines the credibility of the business proposition. The other thing that's a common problem, and I've experienced this myself in my startup experience, is that it's very easy when you're revising the business plan and presentations you're doing to update one and not update the other one. And you end up with presentations and business plans that are inconsistent in the numbers and the things they say. So make sure when you change one document or one part of the business plan, you update the other parts that might relate to it so that it stays consistent. Again, try and avoid anything that will undermine the credibility of the founders of the company and the business proposition. Keep the business plan up to date. As your project progresses, every business plan changes, every business idea changes over time. So try and keep the business plan in sync with what you're telling the investors so that it matches up. Let's talk a little bit about the time to start a company. I think everybody knows that you can go down and register a company in most places with the government very quickly, in a day or two. You can have it legally running. This is not the same as starting a company. Legally registering it and having a real startup are 2 different things. The time to create a good, successful startup usually runs between 1 and 2 years. So be prepared that this is going to be a long process and it's going to take a lot of your time over that period. So be realistic in estimating what your ability is to stay with this project over time. If it's going to take 2 years to start the company, are you going to be able to make a living and keep supporting yourself during this time period? Are the other people that are involved in the startup able to keep going until you have investment and the company's running? You'll see on the chart that we're showing that best case, it takes about 16 months on average to set up a company, and a lot of them take more than 2 years. So it's a complicated business, and it's worth making sure you have a realistic expectation. So again, going back to the people for a few minutes, the researchers and inventors of this idea that you're going to commercialize, should they be running the company? In most cases, probably not. They're usually researchers because they're good at research and they love doing research. Often an entrepreneur will come in and run a business and work very closely with the scientists. The scientists are involved, they're directors sometimes of the company. They usually will be owners and have equity in the company, but they don't normally take a leadership position. There's some obvious examples of exceptions to this. The founders of Google were technologists, but that's the exception. And most technology-led companies are not successful, so you really want to keep to a business focus. But the researchers themselves, a normal pattern when you set up a startup company with university technology is that there's more work to be done to get the technology really ready for the market, or maybe there's additional product development to be done for a continuous stream of new products. So the startup company, when they get the money in from the investors, will contract with the researchers in the university to continue to do the development in conjunction with the university. This is a great scenario because it allows the researchers to stay involved in the company, and yet it also brings in more research money into the university. So it's a great win-win scenario. Researchers, usually will own shares in the company, but having them as directors can be somewhat of an issue because most startup companies, if you look a few years down the line, their business and the technology they're working on is often very different than what they started with. So these researchers may be expert in the area that's planned as the core of the company, but a few years later maybe it's not, and now they're kind of out of sync with the technology and the business. So be prepared that directors change, owners change, the researchers may step out from involvement in the company after a few years, and this is okay. It's a natural evolution of companies. The investment into the company, there are several different kind of categories of investors, and this is usually based on the size of the investment. The earliest investment are seed funds, and these are usually run by funds that are started by the government or subsidized by the government. Sometimes they're subsidized by private charities or philanthropic gifts, but these are small amounts, somewhere between $5,000 and $200,000 US typically. And they're often given as a 100% grant or forgivable loan, so there's no matching requirement. The entrepreneurs don't need to go out and try and find investors to invest in this very early technology. And this is really a very good structure for these funds because it's hard to get private investors to put money into something that's so early and unproven. This seed money is used to take the idea from being something that's developed enough to publish an academic paper to being a good prototype or something that you could demonstrate to an investor or a licensee and get them interested in it. The next level of investor are angel investors. And angel investors can go up to a couple of million US dollars. This level of investment is usually from individuals or a group of individuals who themselves have been entrepreneurs and are very interested in funding early stage companies. They also bring a lot of expertise usually with them, and they'll try and fund companies in the area that they know, and they'll want to be involved in the startup. They'll want to be an advisor, usually a director in the company. And you should welcome this because they often bring very valuable experience that can help you to be more successful. The next stage in an investment are first stage venture capitalists, and these can run anywhere from $500,000 up to $10 million US dollars. And the first stage of venture capital, these are investors that are in purely for the money usually, and they're rarely interested in running the business or being involved in the day-to-day operation of it. And all of these investors, particularly the angel investors and the venture capitalists, are looking for very high returns. An angel investor, because they're the first to put in real money after the seed funds, they're looking for a 10 times improvement in their money. So if they put in 100,000, they're going to want $1 million back. So it's really important to know what their expectation is and be prepared that they are expecting this. They're going to want a very rapid growth rate and high return. The venture capitalists, the later the technology is, the lower the expectation is of the multiples to be gained from investing. So if you have a very mature, very proven technology and you're bringing in another round of funding just to ramp up production, often their expectation isn't that they're going to get 10 times their money back. It'll be something much less than that. And these subsequent rounds are called late stage venture capital, and these are usually investors with a lot of money to invest that are looking for lower risk opportunities that are more proven. So what are investors looking for? First of all, as I mentioned, they're looking for a very high rate of return. They're also, if they're angel investors, they want to have a feeling of comfort with the founders of the company. They want to know that this is a person, if it's the CEO or the chief technologist, that they can get along with, that they understand, that they trust. So the personal relationships are really important with early stage investors. They're also looking to invest in things that are similar to their areas of knowledge and expertise. So if there's an investor that invests in pharmaceutical startups, it's not worth approaching him about a renewable energy idea or a telecom or software idea, because that's not where they're thinking of investing and it's not their comfort zone. So try and find investors that have invested in similar technologies to the one you're trying to bring out. When you do get an expression of interest from an investor, it's very important to be responsive and get back to them with a complete answer to all of their questions as quickly as you can. If you're not responsive, it turns them off and they won't come back a second time. And what can be even worse with this is that many investors talk to each other. So if one investor's been turned off, when somebody else is interested, they may talk to this investor that you've talked to previously and find out that you weren't responsive and they'll never contact you. So be careful to never alienate a potential investor. Treat them with a lot of respect and respond as quickly as you can. One other thing is that in any spin-out situation, things are moving quickly. The technology's changing, the competition is usually changing quickly, so doing things fast is important. Getting a company up and running as fast as you can is important. So be prepared that you're going to have to work hard and move fast and get things done quickly in order to keep the business on track. The process of incorporating a company and setting it up involves a lot more than just the registration of the company. First of all, you want to have an agreement of all the parties that are concerned and set this in writing, and it's usually referred to as a heads of terms or a basic terms agreement. This agreement lays out all the key elements. You know, what is the business of the company? Who are the owners of the company? What's the investment going to be? And how is the company going to be run and operated? So any of the key terms would go into this heads of agreement. The next thing that you're going to need is to appoint lawyers and accountants to help you with setting up the company. You want to make sure that all the documents are drafted carefully and don't create problems later as the company starts to grow. The shareholder agreement is one of these key aspects of the documents. The shareholder agreement sets out who owns what percentage of the company, and sometimes there are options for additional shares of stock that will be granted when certain things occur as the company gets going. For instance, if you hit a milestone, maybe the CEO of the company gets granted more stock. And these things should all be in the share agreement that's part of the startup documentation. The technology license agreement is a key part as well. And this is where if the technology came out of a university or another institution, they will license the technology into the startup. So you need their permission to use that technology because they own it. The situation can also come up where in order to use this technology and make the company go, you need other technology from other companies to be licensed in. So these agreements would also be part of these key documents during the startup. You want to have a contract for the managing director or CEO of the company that states, what's expected of them, what their compensation package will be, what their share ownership in the company will be, and again, setting some milestones that the company will have to meet in the first few years. There should be a memorandum of understanding and an articles of association or articles of incorporation. They're called different things in different places. But this is the legal documentation that sets out the details of the company and how it operates and how changes are made, the rules of running the company. There should also be a share option agreement, as I mentioned before, that lays out if additional options are to be granted in the future, how that's done, and who would get those shares under what conditions. Let's talk a little bit about how companies are structured as far as which of the founders and inventors would come into the company and who will run the company. We follow a structure that's similar to this diagram in that the key leading technologist is usually not going to go from the university into the startup company. They'll stay in the university and continue to be a researcher. And this is a win-win usually because they often want to do research. That's why they became researchers in the first place. So allowing them to continue to do their research but yet have ownership in the company, be involved in the company, but not have to leave the university is often the ideal situation. Sometimes one of the other researchers, let's say a postdoc researcher or a graduate student, will leave and go and work in the startup company as the chief technologist. And as I mentioned before, the company often will contract back to the university and the key lead researcher to continue to develop the technology as the company grows. You're going to want to look on the outside to find the other people to run the company, the managing director. We try to develop a pool of people that are experienced entrepreneurs that we can go to for different types of technology startups and see if they'll be interested in joining us as a chief executive of the company. You're also going to need marketing and sales help. Maybe these are full-time people, maybe they're outside people that you contract in. One of the expectations of investors these days is that you're going to have a very lean startup company. So you're not going to lease a big office space or a factory. You're not going to build buildings, buy a lot of equipment. You want to outsource everything that you can at the beginning in order to minimize the risk, reduce the amount of cash that you have to spend in order to start up the company. Investors are going to be looking for very wise cash management. Running out of cash is the most common failure mode for startup companies. They don't correctly estimate what they're going to be spending each month and each quarter as the company starts up. You're also going to need other people on the outside, again, lawyers and accountants and people to help with the company. Try and do all of this by contract rather than hiring people in at the beginning. Again, it's the low risk approach and it allows you to maximize the cash that you have. So to wrap up, let's talk a little bit about what causes companies to fail. What are the pitfalls to avoid? There's an interesting set of data from a US writer, Michael Ames, and in his book he outlines the most common failures of companies. First of all, the lack of experience from the entrepreneurs. If you don't have experience in that field, experience starting up companies, your chances of success are considerably lower. So try to find experienced entrepreneurs to be in the company. Insufficient capital. Again, thinking that we need this amount of money, but we can only get this amount, but let's go ahead and start and we'll figure out a way to make it on less money. That logic usually doesn't work very well and you end up running out of cash. You've invested a lot of time and personal energy in the company and then you fail. So if you don't have adequate money, don't start. Poor inventory or cash management is the next most common failure. This is where you buy a lot of materials to make product, you build up a lot of product to sell, and it sells slower than you think and you run out of cash. Overinvestment in fixed assets. This again is not following a lean business model where you buy a lot of equipment for production or you rent a factory or a big building for offices. Any kind of fixed costs like that is very high risk, so try and avoid it if you can. Poor credit arrangements. Often in a startup company, you are going to have problems with cash flow. It's inevitable that sometime you're going to be low on cash. So having a good line of credit set up with a bank to tide you over in those emergency situations is really important. Another failure mode is use of company funds for personal reasons. And this is where you have money in the company, but the officers and owners of the company take the money out. They take it out to pay their salary, to pay their rent, whatever it is, and the company runs out of money. So try and keep the money in the company separate, and it's only used for company purposes. A rather surprising mode for failure is also unexpected growth. You're too successful, you grow too fast, and so you haven't planned for how you're going to keep up with a higher demand than you expect. And this actually does happen, where companies have lots of customers ordering product and they can't deliver. And they end up shipping product that isn't high quality, or they miss shipments, and the reputation of the product and the company is destroyed in the process, and the company fails. A couple of other areas to watch out for are competition. Always be aware of what your competitors are doing. And competition may not be something that does exactly the same thing that your product does. It may be something from out in the outfield that comes in that you're not expecting and satisfies the same need that you're trying to fill in the marketplace with a completely different idea. So for instance, if you were making slide rules in the 1970s, you probably made the best slide rule you could and felt you were keeping up with the competition. But what you didn't expect was the electronic calculator to come in and make slide rules obsolete overnight. So these kinds of things do happen, so try and be aware of what's happening in the market and move proactively before it catches you. Low sales, be realistic about your sales expectations. Be conservative. You're always better off to say, we think we're going to sell this much, but we're going to guarantee this much, and we're going to plan the business and our expenses around this lower amount. And then if you do better than that, everyone's delighted, the investors are happy, and you are successful and the company keeps going. So try and be conservative in your sales estimates. So in closing, I highly recommend that you try a spinout. It'll be exciting, you'll learn a lot, and even if it's not successful, hopefully you'll go and try again, and I wish you the best of luck in your efforts.